Gather round, it's Taley time. Classics. Hello and welcome to Taley Time Classics with me, your host. What's my name, you ask? You should know by now. A name is something very important which we all have. Presumably, if you don't have a name, I highly recommend getting one, pronto. They're pretty useful. Today's classic tale is about a name, an unknown name. Well, it's the title of this tale, so you should know it, just like you should know my name. I only say it like 3 times at the start of every episode. If you haven't remembered my name by the end of the episode, I think I may just deserve your firstborn. Actually, I don't want that. What am I going to do with that? What do you have of equal or lesser value? Rumpelstiltskin, edited by Charles Scrivens. Once a year, the king went outside the palace grounds to go through the streets of the village and appear before his subjects. The populace gathered in the streets for a chance to see their king. A poor miller stood proudly in front of his little mill with his daughter, waiting for the king. The king's procession slowly proceeded down the street as the king waved to all. After a brief wave and glance in the direction of the miller, the king turned to wave at another section of the crowd. The miller, not wanting to lose the king's attention and wanting to appear important, called out, "My daughter here can spin straw into gold." Did he just come up with that on the fly or what? That's a weird thing to just pop into somebody's mind, but it would be pretty sad if he'd been thinking about it for a while and that's what he came up with. I need to impress the king. Think. There's nothing actually impressive about me, so I'll need to make something up. Kings like gold. I'll say I've got a bunch of gold. It totally makes sense for a poor miller to have a bunch of gold. But then he might ask to see it. I know. I'll say I can make a bunch of gold, then it would make perfect sense that I don't have any gold around to show him. Yeah, I can make gold. That will surely impress him and he'll definitely believe me, because how would he figure out that it's not true? It's not like saying I could see the future, which nobody's ever been able to fake and trick people into believing, yep, this is gonna be great. I'm pretty sure I've thought of everything, nothing could go wrong, but just in case I'd better say my daughter can do it. The king stopped the procession and said to the miller, "Your daughter must be cleverest in all the village to do such a thing. I would very much like to see this incredible feat. She must come to my palace at once." The miller's daughter joined the procession, leaving behind her ecstatic father. Once at the palace, she was brought to a small room full of straw. "Bring her a spinning wheel and a reel, and let her start right away," said the king. But when the equipment was brought, the girl did not take to spinning. The king asked her why she did not spin the straw into gold, to which the girl simply replied, "I can't." The king thought that the girl was holding back on him, so he angrily said, "I, your king, command that you spin this straw into gold, so you best get to work. If by tomorrow morning you have not accomplished this task, you must be sentenced to death for disobeying your king." I like how the king doesn't think, "That rascally miller, he lied to me and should be punished." No, it makes much more sense that the girl who says she can't spin straw into gold is lying. Back in the day, nobody ever believed anyone who said they didn't have magical powers. You just had to hope nobody accused you of having magical powers. Even if somebody did have magical powers, it would be a lose-lose. For all the miller's daughter knows, she would spin straw into gold and the king would go, "Witch, put her to the stake." Meanwhile, Dad's just back at the mill, super pleased with himself, thinking, "My daughter is important and the king is very impressed with me." With that, the king turned and left the room, slamming the door behind him. The girl looked from the locked door to the spinning wheel to the straw, her eyes filling with water all the while, until she could not see at all and began to bawl. Not a moment after the first tear hit the ground, the door opened, and through it came a little man who said, "My dear, what is it that makes you cry so?" "Oh," wailed the girl, "I have been tasked with spinning the straw into gold by morning, but even if I had all the time in the world, I still wouldn't know how." "I could do it for you," said the little man, "but what will you give me in return?" "My necklace," said the girl, taking it off and handing it to the man. He accepted her offer and sat in front of the wheel. The little man set to work right away, feeding the straw into the wheel. After just 3 spins, the reel was full of gold. The girl looked at the gold in amazement as the little man prepared a new reel. 3 spins later, the second reel was full as well. The little man whistled a pleasant song as he spun. The anxious girl began to relax a bit, and late in the night, the girl finally fell asleep. When the miller's daughter awoke early to a knock at the door, the straw was completely gone, replaced by reels and reels of gold, and the little man was nowhere to be found. The king entered, saying, "Time's up, now you—" The king stopped in astonishment. "Excellent, well done," the king said joyously. The king marveled at the gold for some time, but the longer he looked, the more his giddiness faded and his greed grew. The king took the girl to another room full of straw, this time much larger. When the girl did not take to spinning, the king once again grew angry. "Still unwilling to work before your king, are you? So be it. Just remember, I have already warned you once what will happen if you disobey. I expect you to have spun all of this straw into gold by the time I return in the morning." "What am I to do now?" thought the girl aloud. "Now that the first room of straw has been turned to gold, no one will believe the truth that I cannot perform such a feat." "Well then," came the voice of the little man, "what will you give me if I do it for you once again?" "Take my ring," offered the girl. The little man did so, and then he began to spin. He hummed the now familiar tune as he effortlessly produced reel after reel of gold. The girl slept somewhat easier that night. In the morning, the king stared at the new room of gold with much the same excitement as the first. Still, though, the king's lust for gold had not quite yet been sated. He took the miller's daughter to an even larger room filled with straw. "Now you must spin all this straw into gold by the next sunrise. I know I have asked much of you. However, this time, should you succeed, I shall take you as my wife, and you will never need to spin again." Now, you may be thinking that it doesn't even seem like the two like each other. Why would they want to get married? But this is a pragmatic move by the king. You don't want this girl to spin you a bunch of gold, let her go, thinking you're now super rich, then she goes out, spins a bunch more gold, flooding the market and taking its value. Get her to spin for you, then retire. And he probably wants to keep around just in case he misread the gold market and really needs her to come out of retirement. Is it romantic? No. Is it dehumanizing? Yeah. But is it a good investment plan? Absolutely not. She's not even the one spinning the straw into gold. You've got to do your research before big investments. After the king had left, the little man returned once again and said, "What will you give me this time if I spin the straw into gold?" "I have given you all I have to give," the girl replied. "There's nothing left." "Nothing to give right now, but perhaps one day that will change. Promise me, should you become queen, your first child." She should have known something was up when the guy who can make unlimited amounts of gold accepted a poor girl's probably not very special necklace as payment. I suppose his valuation of gold could be warped because he has an endless supply, but I have to imagine he's undercharging just for the labor. He's working all night for a necklace or a ring. I'm not doing that unless there are pearls or diamonds involved, which I doubt very much. Even then, I'd rather just have cold hard cash. I don't know how much a pearl necklace is worth, and I'm certainly not going to wear it myself, so now I have to go and get it appraised and find a buyer who will pay what it's worth. That's like an extra day's work on top of the night's work I already did. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. The miller's daughter, having found the king to be quite fickle, doubted that would ever come to pass. She worried much more about what would happen if she failed. She made the promise the little man desired, and he started his work immediately. The girl had a troubled and restless sleep that night. The king came into the gold-filled room in the morning and was finally satisfied. The king's marriage to the miller's daughter was arranged, and she became queen. 1 year later, the queen, happier than she had ever been, gave birth to a beautiful child. The queen had not given the little man a single thought until he came into her room and asked for the child. All the queen's happiness turned to horror at the thought of losing her child. She offered the little man treasure and riches instead, anything but her child. The little man refused. No, not even if you could give me all the treasure in the world would it be more precious to me than a living thing.
Living thing, eh? Now we're getting somewhere. How about a nice pet cricket? That's a living thing, no? What about a frog? Frogs are fun. Okay, fine. What about a kitten? Still pretty low maintenance. Work with me here. Alright, final offer. A puppy. You won't even notice the difference between a puppy and my baby. Everybody I talk to tells me dogs and babies are barely distinguishable. You treat them exactly the same. It's a lower commitment. You don't have to worry about paying for a puppy's college tuition. How about it? I'll even throw in a second puppy because I'm feeling generous. Still no? Ugh. I get it. You drive a hard bargain, but I believe in compromise and I think I've got a perfect solution for everybody. You can have my husband.
The queen began to weep in sorrow, even more fiercely than when the little man first came to her. The little man was moved ever so slightly, and in his pity said, I will give you 3 days with your child. If you can find out my name in that time, then the child will remain yours. The queen instantly began to create a list of all the names she knew. She spent the whole night adding to it. She sent a messenger out into the country to discover other less common names. The little man returned the next day to see what names the queen had for him. Peter, Andrew, James, she listed name after name. After every name, the little man's smile grew a little, and he said, That is not my name. The next day, the queen sent out more messengers, and she herself went out into the village to ask the populace the oddest names they had ever heard. When the little man returned, she guessed all manner of strange and curious names. How about short ribs, or sheepshanks, or double stitch? But to each came the same reply, That is not my name. That night, the queen's already troubled sleep was interrupted by wails from her newborn child. She went to her child, rocked the child, and began to whistle a calming tune. Switching to a hum, the queen realized the tune was that of the little man. Even though she had not heard it in over a year, she recalled it perfectly. Words came from deep within her mind as she began to sing. Venture a little ways outside a little town. Amongst the little hills you'll find a little spring. Go down the little stream into a little cove. Why, there a little man can make a little home and find a little peace. Early in the morning, before the break of dawn, the queen left the palace in hopes of finding the little man and his name. She followed the instructions in the song that she had heard in her sleep all that time ago, and sure enough found a little house. She peered through the window and saw the little man before a fire, hopping on one leg, dancing and shouting. Though the queen may cry, how happy am I, that I will have her child in no time. I have won the game, for none know the name, Rumpelstiltskin, author of this rhyme. The queen almost cried out in glee, but caught herself. She quietly and quickly made her way back to the palace. Not long after the queen's return, the little man came to the palace courtyard and said, Tell me, my queen, what is my name? Your time runs out. Is your name Colin? That is not my name, the little man smiled. Is your name Carl?
What? She guessed sheepshanks before guessing Carl? Alright, just give him the baby. I like the baby's chances better with him now. I can't trust someone who would guess somebody's name is Sheepshanks when a great name like Carl is still on the table. You're never going to meet a Carl who's like, I hate being a younger brother. Parents use the best names right on the first kid. If I had been born first, then I would have gotten to be named Sheepshanks. When she guessed Sheepshanks, the little man should have been like, no, but you know what? If you name the kid Sheepshanks, you can keep it. I think that would have wrapped the whole thing up nicely. Prince Sheepshanks or Princess Sheepshanks. I think Sheepshanks is gender neutral.
That is not my name. Is your name Rumpelstiltskin? The little man's smile vanished into a look of shock. You sneak! You cheat! The little man shouted in anger. The devil himself whispered that into your ear. Yes, the devil himself! The little man stomped his right foot as he shouted. The queen shook her head no as the little man ranted, angering him further and causing him to stomp harder. The ground cracked, and with his neck stomped, the little man plunged his foot into the earth, opening a deep crevice. "You deny it?" the little man cried hysterically. "I will see about that. I'll ask the devil myself." With that, the little man fell into the hole. The king ordered the hole be sealed, but the queen ordered the opposite, and the king deferred to her. The queen had nothing left to fear from the little man, who she knew to be quite wrong. She often visited the courtyard, leaned against the barricade around the hole, and looked down, expecting the little man one day to crawl back out. She thought that if she wept as she had on their first encounter, perhaps he would return, but she never again faced such sorrow. The queen lived happily with her family, and the little man was never seen again.
That about does it for today's episode. Now, you might be inclined to think that this tale teaches us not to bet the fate of lives on something as simple as a name, but we should learn just the opposite. Every time a child is named, lives are on the line. You have to take it seriously. You can't go naming your kid something crazy like Rumpelstiltskin. If you're really a terrible person and you want to call your kid Sheepshanks, well, that's what nicknames are for. You want a name like Charles Scrivens. I trust you remembered.